It's the next day from the video that I just posted, the one about MIDI. I decided to get some sleep last night because it ended up getting pretty late by the time I had finished everything. So now it is Wednesday, January 4th, 2012. I am going to do 2 videos today. I sometimes get ahead of myself um, because today was the first day of Introduction to Strobe Production Systems. We'll get there. So for now, let's discuss some digital audio in theory. Now, I've been trying to think about how I'm going to talk about this because really this class was the intense class. Like there was MIDI, and MIDI was only hard because I had to focus on DAU so much. Like this is the class that basically the midterm was 50 questions, and then the final was cumulative. So you had the 50 questions from the midterm plus 50 more questions on the stuff that we covered after the midterm. So you still had to remember everything. Now luckily most things that were on the midterm are really fundamental things that you should know anyway. But still, there's that factor of you still have to conjure that stuff, those thoughts up. And I've got my folder open here of all the stuff, and really I would say like MIDI was more lecture heavy than lab heavy because we only had that one assignment to do, but digital audio was both lecture and lab heavy. I mean, it was intense on both ends. So like I said, I'm trying to think of a good way to talk about all this and cover it all without repeating anything, but I really can't think of any way, so I think we're just going to go ahead and take off with the lecture stuff first. And the one thing to note about the lectures for this class is that, like I said in the MIDI video, the lectures and labs lasted the full 4-hour block, so MIDI and DAU, no joke, like they mean business. Let's see, so lecture 1 was all about basically numbers and measurement. That was the boring stuff. The first lecture was, yeah. Lecture 2 is where it got a little more interesting. We started talking about the sampling theorem and PCM audio, pulse code modulation. And really the big thing here is knowing aliasing, fold over, your Nyquist frequency, your sample rate. There's a big block of standard stuff that you have to know. It's like your base. Like seriously, there's a big chunk of stuff that you have to know to get the rest of it. And like Mina and I, like when we drove back to Virginia and then back here, we would like review this stuff. Like I would just look at her and be like, quantization, go. Like what is it? And, yeah, measurement. It's a measurement of amplitude. She is correct. So quantization, measurement of amplitude per sample. We'll get there. So yeah, we would review and just go over the stuff because it's a lot of stuff. So I'll kind of walk you through the basics, give you some things you can check out for the class and everything. And the biggest 2 things were sample rate and bit depth. Those are the 2 big things. And really we had to learn how to translate binary code, which isn't too hard. I mean, at first it's a little confusing, but it gets easier, less difficult. I'll put it that way. So yeah, the binary code, and then that gives you bit depth and all the stuff like was it 8 bits make a byte, and then 1024 bytes equals a megabyte, and then kilobyte, kilobyte, then megabyte, then gigabyte. It's been a little while. It's been a little like 2.5 weeks now. So come with some slack. Gosh, yeah, that class. It gave me a run for my money. But I do have all the basics down. Like your sample rate, you can't go above half your sampling rate. That's your Nyquist frequency. If you do, this thing called aliasing or fold over occurs, and basically it can create a cool effect. I think we took a look at it. He did a spectrum sweep in this. I can't remember what it was called, but it was this analyzer, like a visual analyzer of the frequencies in Pro Tools. Wow, gosh, what was that called? I'm not gonna worry about it, but if I'll try to remember to put a link to a video that, because I looked it up to show Mina, cause it was actually pretty cool. But yeah, we go through bit depth, sample rate, quantization is important. That goes along with your measurements, your bit depth affects your quantization, and there's quantization error, and then you get into dither, which helps correct that, and then you get your anti-imaging filter on your DA converters. The D to A and then A to D converters, which is D stands for digital and then A for analog. Covered those. We had to learn the signal flow for each. So the signal flow for an analog to digital converter would be signal comes in, it has dither, and then it goes through, I think it's a low pass filter, and then you have your sample and hold, and then your quantizer, and then it comes out as ones and zeros. And then a D to A converter is just the opposite of that. So you have your quantizer, well no, it's not a quantizer, it's the sample and hold, and then it goes to the anti-imaging filter, and then out. I think that was how it was. It's the reverse of an A to D converter, obviously. And we talked about CDs. CDs were a really big part of it, like the blue book, the red book, the yellow book. How CDs work, the physical dimensions of the CDs, what they can hold, all the different types of CDs were in, or not just CDs, but DVDs and even Blu-ray disc. A Blu-ray disc, amazing, and not just that, but how even a normal CD is written. And I mentioned Blu-rays because they can hold like 50 gigs of stuff. I don't know how they do it, I can't remember, but Blu-ray discs they're pretty cool. And even like I mentioned, just how CDs are burned, like your mind would be blown at what goes into burning a CD. Like you have your favorite band, let's just say your favorite band happens to be the Mars Volta, and you're like, all right, so I want to burn a CD to listen on the car trip because for whatever reason you can't listen to your iPod or whatever. So you pop the CD in your computer and you're like, all right, iTunes, let's burn some Bedlam and Goliath on this CD, right? And so it starts going, and then a couple minutes later it pops out and it's done, right? Well, what goes into that is just amazing. It is insane how difficult it actually is to get a CD burned. I mean, I was telling Mina about it, and she was like, like, yeah, I don't know, it's crazy. But yeah, we talked about CDs. Let's see, what else do we have? Where did my list go of things? Because we had to read every single chapter in the textbook. And then, like, I thought it was kind of weird, like, we had our reading in the textbook, but then there would be required external reading, where he'd put a link to the internet in the textbook, and we'd have to go and read that. And some of these articles were just so long that, I mean, skimming through it was really the best way to go, because there just really wasn't, there was literally not enough time to do the full homework if you're really one of those type of people. And I do like to be as thorough as I can with the homework, but like it was stressing me out to the point where I was just like, I gotta stop for a minute, So let's take a look. There's the course manual. And the course manual is like one of those that you have to type in the password, which I'm not going to say. You'll find that out once you actually start going to the school, if you decide to. I think there were 7 chapters, and each one kind of built on the last one. And then the last chapter, like the final chapter, number 7, kind of went full circle back around to the first chapter. So it was kind of cool. Chapter 2 was about sampling theorem. Chapter 3, let's see, was about your conversions, your classical and modern. Like you had, A to D, D to A, and then you also have different types of those. Like you have sigma delta modulation, pulse code modulation, pulse width, pulse depth modulation. It can get pretty intense. We discussed latency. Check out latency, which only it can occur in analog signals, but it really does in the computers with the ones and zeros. And it includes buffering and all this, the doctor's office and all this stuff. Like there was an analogy that used the buffering as like the patient's, like your bits and stuff are the patients in a doctor's office. I don't know, it was weird. Chapter 4 was about DSD and digital transfer. So I think it was Sony, I think was the company that patented direct stream digital, and that's a one bit. Like instead of having 8 bits at a time, you would have 1 bit at a time, and it takes way more samples. It was interesting. Oh, hello there.
Hi.
Do you have anything to add about digital audio? Anything?
It was cool.
It was cool, and it was all right. Yeah, those look tasty.
You want one?
Sure. Yeah, we bought these chips. They're pretty good. All right. So chapter 5 discussed streaming audio and data reduction. So, getting audio prepped and primed to be streamed over the internet. And this is really important. Like if you're an artist or a musician, or you're working for one, and for example, they want to get there, or you want to get your music on iTunes, this was the chapter that really discussed how to do that and how to get your music to sound the best to go through the internet, which I thought was pretty cool. And that so streaming audio and data reduction hand in hand. And it was about how to reduce the data without losing much sound quality, how to compromise between the two, and discussed bandwidth. Bandwidth was another big thing. Chapter 6 was digital disc format. So that was the chapter about the CDs. I really got in. I did get into that chapter. It was pretty cool. Like I said, the CD thing kind of blew my mind. Chapter 7 was about DSP, summing, and scaling, which again brought it back around to the math aspect of it. But yeah, I mean the lectures were what they were. I didn't really take notes. I didn't find a need to take notes because we had to read the stuff. And I'm the type of person where if I read it, it sticks to me. I mean, I did have to take notes on the homework, or for the homework. Those were the homework assignments, but not actually in class. That's why I took maybe 1 page of notes in digital audio. I can't remember where it was, but there was at least maybe 1 page that I took. Yeah, I don't know where it's at. Yeah, here we go. It's like, here's the one page of notes, if you're interested, that I took. I'll move it up to the second half for you. And that took a little bit on the back of that page, which I guess we were talking about sample and hold and all that. See if you can see that. But yeah, the lectures weren't bad. Some of them were kind of boring. But it wasn't like the way I had Brian Smithers as an instructor, and he was really good. I really liked what he had to say. But the way he teaches was definitely more of, I guess, a classical type of professor. You know, like he would lecture, and he did not have slides to write stuff down. Excuse me. Like from MIDI, we would copy stuff down off the slides, but he had like graphs and pictures and stuff. So it really wasn't anything that would help to write, you know. Plus, we could download the slides from Propeller anyway, so, you know, those were available. And that was another reason I didn't write the notes, was because the slides were available. But, yeah, it was definitely more of a pay attention and listen to what he has to say kind of lecture. So, yeah, Brian Smithers, I even met up with him one day. It was the last week, and it was a couple days before the final. And I emailed him, and I was like, yo, you know, Mr. Smithers, can I meet up with you? Can we make an appointment? So I went in there, and we talked for like 10 minutes just to talk about the stuff. And I just wanted to make sure that I was on the right track. So as you can see, I definitely put way more focus into DAU than I did MIDI. And because of that, actually, my MIDI grade it didn't really slip. I ended up getting an 88 on the final for MIDI. But I pulled through the class with a 96.4, and I'm still currently waiting for my DAU grades. I'm not sure what they're going to be. I know I passed, hopefully with an A+, but I did end up passing MIDI with an A+, so I thought I'd throw that in there. So let's move on to the labs for DAU. Now the labs, again, this was a class where we used logic exclusively, but it was different than MIDI. In MIDI, we used logic to learn how to use it and how to use MIDI. Obviously, it was called that for a reason. But in DAU, logic was definitely more of a tool to learn the things that we were supposed to do. And we had to download lab assets. So unlike MIDI, where we would just create and do whatever, we had to download and really go through these packets of stuff. And each PDF file had questions and little boxes where we had to write in the answer. And there was a big practical exam at the end of all the labs. So the labs for DAU were very involved. They lasted pretty much the full 4 hours. We would get out around 12:30, so 9 to about 12:30 at night, every other night, for about 20 days. And it was the type of thing where I would start working, and it seemed like nobody else in my lab really would. My boy Ashwin worked on his stuff, but I didn't really know. Everyone else was like on Netflix or Facebook or whatever. But I would actually sit there and seriously concentrate and work, and like get in the zone. And there were some nights where I wouldn't finish everything. Like there were some labs that just had that much stuff in them where I wouldn't finish, so I'd have to come home and I was dead at that point. I'd crash and wake up the next day and finish the lab stuff from the previous night. So the labs were very, very involved, and we used logic every single time. We had to, I think the biggest thing we had to download, it was like maybe 1.5 gigs of stuff. I mean, it was a lot of audio files. Because what would happen is we would download the file with whatever, all the things we needed for the particular lab, and that included not only the PDF file of what to do, but all of the assets, meaning audio files, the logic session, whatever it would be. And there were 8 total labs, and each of them had a lot of stuff. The first lab was just the introduction to logic and how to use it for what we needed to use it for in that class. The second lab was bit budgeting. So basically, they kind of made us pretend like, alright, so say you were hired by a video game company and you had to fit so many different sounds into this much space. So we would have to take like 10 audio files and fit them within 2 megabytes. And then we had to turn around and use those same audio files but scrunch them to half that, so even smaller. We had to explain why we did that, what we heard when we did that, and then compare it to how the original file sounded. So there was a lot of, when I say a lot, I mean a lot, and most of the class, I would say maybe 65% of the labs for DAU was really about critical listening and comparing an original file to a what's the word? An affected file, like one that was, that had audio quality loss. Why can't I think of the word? But you know what I'm saying. An original file versus an affected one. So lots of critical listening in digital audio in theory, much more than I expected, but it was good practice for sure. The third lab was about recording. Basically, we had these hidden tracks in Logic, and they would play, and we had to record them as audio files in the same Logic session. And that class really taught me how to use my auxiliary sends and my buses in Logic. Like seriously, there was so much stuff that just blew my mind. Like I didn't even know Logic could do. Like I knew it could do awesome things that I didn't know about, but just things that are really easy that made my mixes just so much better. And I'll get to that here in a minute. Let's continue with the labs. The fourth lab was mixing. What do you know? We had to do the same thing. We had a preset Logic session, and it had like 20 tracks, and we had to go through and mix it and make different auxiliary tracks and route them with the buses and put effects on them, etc. Lab 5 was about streaming. So we had to reduce the size of the file as much as possible without losing any quality. And it was harder that time because we actually used music pieces, from what I remember. So you could definitely tell where your losses were. Unlike with the bit budgeting where it was just sound effects, this time it was actually getting it ready to go on the internet and stuff like that. It was interesting. Lab 6 was the discussion and use of optical discs. So we talked about how to use with the WaveBurner application. In fact, we didn't just talk about it, but we used it. How to make hidden tracks in WaveBurner, and how to use, burn a disk with WaveBurner. It's really easy, actually. I'd never really taken a look at WaveBurner before, but it's pretty sweet, no lie. And it comes with, when you get your project launch box, it's included with Logic. So if you install your Logic, through all the disks, WaveBurner is included in that, which is how to put together professional CDs. Like, you can tell it, how long in between each song, and pretty much professionally do a disc. So if you're trying to, put your mixtape out there and you really want it to be good, and not just some songs burned onto a CD through iTunes, WaveBurner is pretty cool. Lab 7 was about generational loss. And generational loss is like every time something is re-recorded. So in that lab, we had another pre-made Logic session, and we had to get into groups of 4. So there was 4 of us, and we had an 1/8-inch cable to an 1/8-inch cable, and we would do the output of one of our computers to the input of the others and record all around. So we had to do a full circle twice. So at the end of it, the original file had been re-recorded 8 times, and the loss of quality was just horrendous. I mean, it was like a nightmare of how bad it actually was. Like, it made me want to puke. Like, a knot in my stomach. It sounded horrible. So that was a really eye-opening lab, and that was the one lab that was really quick. Like, my group, it was my friend Ashwin, there was another girl that was with us, and another guy. And the other guy was like, he was just sick. He was sick as a dog, like fever, sweating in there. Everything was crazy. It was gross. So he was like, yeah, I just want to go home, because he was dying, and we could all tell. So we did our stuff, and we were in and out of there in less than 20 minutes. So that was nice. That was the one lab that they cut some slack. We finished our stuff, showed the lab techs we were done, and we were out. And then Lab 8 was something called the Gauntlet, which is basically a big review for the practical. So there were 9 labs. My mistake. There were 9 labs, because the last lab was the practical exam. And Lab 8 was, like I said, just a review of everything that we had done previously. So we had to utilize everything that we did in every single lab we were tested on. And if you did what I did and actually worked on your stuff, the practical exam went by in like an hour, because there really was that much stuff. And we only had about 2 hours to finish everything, so I don't know how everyone else did. I'm assuming they did all right, but it was a breeze, no problem. And there was maybe one thing where it took me a minute, because I looked over something, like in the mixing section, but I caught it and went back and fixed it, so it was no problem. And my lab techs were really cool. Dave and Dave and Dustin were the 2 guys' names. And Dave made it really cool. Dustin was awesome. I really enjoyed the DAU labs, much more than the lectures, I'll put it that way. Like the labs, I was doing stuff, I was mixing, I was using Logic, learning stuff about it. It was great. And actually, my knowledge of Logic from both classes, it just went up tremendously, and there were things that I learned in MIDI that I would do. Like I learned how to import downloaded MIDI files and actually open them up to where you'll have however many tracks are actually in the MIDI file. So I took I practiced on some Final Fantasy music again, because that's like really the big reason to play those games. They have amazing soundtracks. But I took the Final Fantasy VII Victory Fanfare, and I took one of the tracks from Final Fantasy X, downloaded the MIDI files off the internet, opened them up in Logic, and I think the one from Final Fantasy X had like 15 tracks in it, And what I did for both of them was I reorchestrated them. So I copied the MIDI information over, and then I used the skills that I picked up from digital audio to mix everything well. So, I mean, the two classes, they don't really have to do with each other, but they go hand in hand. So if you're kind of wondering, like, well, why do I have to take both of them in a row or at once? It's because they do kind of go together. They really do. All in all, I had a really good time in that class. The labs were intense, but I really liked it. That was sitting there and doing those labs. I would, like I said, I wouldn't even finish, and I'm talking, I would even work through our 30-minute break or 45-minute break. I would take my computer, still have my headphones in, go outside the classroom, sit down in one of the chairs, and keep working. And that's when I knew this is definitely for me. You know, when I can sit there on the computer and work in Logic and just go nonstop for 4 hours, I figured it's for me. So for DAU, if you decide to come to Full Sail, it's intense. Be warned. I'm not trying to turn you away from the school. I'm not trying to make it sound harder than it is or easier than it is. I'm also not convincing you to come to the school. I mean, I'm just letting you know from my own experience what it's like, how it went down. So if you're serious about audio and you want to learn this stuff, well, this is the place to be for sure. Don't screw around though, because I mean, why waste your money and your time? Because I definitely put my effort into it, and it's paying off. I've got to say, things are going really well. Break was awesome. Like I said, Mina and I went up to Virginia and did nothing for about, well, I can't really say we did nothing because we actually did a lot of stuff. But it did not, I mean, like we went to D.C., Washington, D.C., and I actually saw the White House for the first time. It's smaller than I thought. Big for its day when it was built, but now it's kind of small compared to the buildings around it. The National Christmas tree was disappointing, not going to lie. But yeah, it was alright. I got, one of the things I got that actually really helped is the Apple wireless trackpad, or whatever. This thing is awesome. I don't know. And just an update as kind of like college life kind of thing. Yeah, I got lots of free stuff for Christmas. Mainly, the things I got were for P90X. Mina and I started P90X on Monday, and I finished my third day of it earlier, which was arms and shoulders. And it's intense. The first day I woke up, or the first day I did it, the second day I woke up was sore, and my whole body is pretty much sore basically. And Mina's giving it her best shot, just as well as I am. And life's going pretty good. She's got a gig with this band called The Classics, KLAXXICS. You should check them out. They're local around Orlando, and they play like old school 50s, 60s, and 70s music. Really awesome. And as far as school goes, I will catch you on the next video actually, which is going to be for today, which was the first day of Intro to Show Pro. So I will see you there. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Give me feedback, questions, comments, concerns, whatever about the school. I will try and help you. And if I don't know the answer to something, I can find out because I do know people around the school. So all is well. I'll catch you in the next video.